with the story that you've told me, it's clear to see and understand how things have gotten to the point that they're at, and also where we might look to go next. There's like a clear thing that people are doing over and over again, but most people who don't know will just say the Big Bang happened, uh, and science has most of the answers or whatever. I mean, science definitely still has like answers, but it's just we then get confused because nobody can really link that origin to here, or not a vast majority of people who are in the general public can't do that. So yeah, so it's just what are your thoughts on that, just in general?
Well, I didn't completely understand that, but there's two things. One, our discussion was somewhat historical because that's how you asked it. How
Yeah,
were things discovered? And that's a way to approach this. Another way to approach this is to not explain it in the way that it was discovered, but rather saying we take everything that we've discovered, and this is what we think happened. The Big Bang started, the universe began expanding, inflation took over, expansion happened, protons were formed, uh, atoms were formed, galaxies were formed, stars were formed, galaxies were formed. Here we are. You know, that's a different thing. It's not telling you how it was discovered per se, but it tells you the history of the universe.
yeah, but I think that's the issue. I think, or rather, I'm suggesting that the issue is that it's the history, but with an underlying assumption, and that's why it fails to reach people enough, because it's not the true story of what we know. It's the assumption that something happened, and then all of these other things that we do know. And so, for me, it's just kind of like, yeah, I guess the question is kind of, do you think it would be better to tell the story as it was discovered, not necessarily, um, with that, uh, um, a hit? This is what happened in the beginning, and then move forward from that. Because the beginning is unknown. Essentially, it kind of for people who don't know any better, it can kind of, um, sit in a place which is just like, well, I can either believe this or something else. You see what I mean? And there doesn't need to be a belief, but because we start with a thing that's not verified properly, you still end up with a belief. So it's just, yeah. The question is, I guess, um, do you think that it could be better told in a different way, or does that not concern you, or basically, what are your thoughts on that?
Problem is if you tell it the way it was discovered, you paint a false narrative. And the reason you paint a false narrative is you say, Fred discovered this and Mary discovered that and Joe discovered this other thing. And you get the idea that science marches along figuring things out, when in fact, what science does is it goes down the wrong path, it backs up, there's arguments, there's screw ups. You get the impression that science just it never makes a false step. So that's the problem I see with doing a history thing is you don't see the mistakes, or at least that's not necessarily a problem, but it's a price you pay. What I've done, and I don't remember what the hell I did this in, but I wrote something recently where I started in the modern day, and then I told the story backwards.
Mm.
So, now this happened, but a billion years ago this happened, and 2 billion years ago this happened, and I can explain why we think that. Then I get back to the point where, okay, at this point, we're sure we understand what happened, a trillionth of a second after the Big Bang because we understand the physics. Okay, now I'm about to get into the place where I'm speculating. This might have happened, that might have happened, the other thing might have happened. And then at the end, I turn it all around and I go much more quickly out, starting with the, okay, now here's the story. It started here and here's where we are now. So that way, as you go backward in time, you sort of explain why we think each step, and you explain where we are no longer certain, and then you explain some of the cool ideas that we're thinking about from before we were certain. And so people, kind of have they have a distinction between what we know and what we're guessing. So I don't know.
Okay,
I've done that in the past too.
cool. Yeah, yeah. It's just something that for me as someone who's obviously a science background, I'm very aware. Like if I speak to, because I'm kind of in the middle. I'm not like a scientist per se, but I'm not. Don't just know. I didn't just finish science at school in secondary school or like the age of 15 or 16. Um, and so yeah, that leap of basically like um the stuff that you've kind of gone into a bit from say the age of 16 is such a massive leap. And I just wonder, it's not only in physics, but you know, there's that thing that people always seem to be missing where they can't connect those dots because they just have no um I don't think they've got the right direction to even start. So I just yeah, just the assumption always seems to be that like science is correct, but unless you personally understand how it works, you're left going, well, it's just another story like any other. So yeah, it was just uh, a kind of a thing to kind of I guess finish on.